Hi, good morning. Thanks for being with me here today. I'm really excited to be back recording. This is actually my first podcast that I'm recording since the baby was born. So it's nice to be back in the swing of things. And in true working mom fashion, here we are. Somebody is still very little and very attached and does not particularly nap well, not on mama. So, anyways, diving in today, are we looking at medicine wrong? So, I just wanted to talk about it's a topic that's near and dear to me and see if this makes any sense, if this resonates with you. How many times have you gone to the doctor for a new problem or perhaps even diagnosed with a new condition? And what does the doctor talk to you about? Probably the medication that you need to be on. However, in my experience, there's not a lot of conversation about kind of the root cause. Because let's think about that. If you have a condition, let's say it's high blood pressure, and they start you on medication, your blood pressure will come down with that medicine. But the problem wasn't the lack of medicine. It wasn't the lack of medication that caused the high blood pressure. Something else did. So instead of addressing the root cause of what caused that problem, we're kind of attacking it from the other end. This is one of the big critiques of the US healthcare system. And part of the reason why it is so cost ineffective is that by and large, we're addressing issues at the wrong side of the problem. It's a well-known fact that America has one of the highest healthcare costs per person across developed nations, and ironically, we have one of the sickest nations. So we're not seeing a correlation between spending those dollars and getting good outcomes. Now, there's a lot of nuance around that. That in of itself doesn't represent a bad thing. For instance, here in the US, we do have a lot of money that goes into research and development for new experimental cures and treatments and whatnot. And those things cost a lot of money and don't always have a lot of outcomes. In America, we also value choice more than in particularly countries that are on a universal healthcare system. You don't have quite as many choices. A lot of choices are made for you about the kind of care that you can receive. There's a lot more guidelines of what has to happen to you before you can get testing done, and there's a lot more control around and end of life decisions. So that's also where we get some more extra spending in healthcare, in our healthcare system compared to other countries. However, in my personal experience from working in the hospital over a decade, the bulk of healthcare spending is in management of chronic illness that is often either preventable and or treatable. So what I mean by that is over the years, the majority of people that I have taken care of have come into the hospital because of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, or some complication from those conditions. Those conditions are part of what we call metabolic syndrome. So they're all conditions that something with the body's regulatory system metabolism is thrown off. These also are conditions that largely are within a person's control how far they progress. Now, I'm sure I'm going to ruffle some feathers saying that. And you're probably thinking, but Kayla, what about genes? Diabetes runs in my family. Well, there's a little bit of a joke that you may or may not have heard before in the health space that no, diabetes doesn't run in your family. Nobody runs in your family. And there's truly some truth to both sides of that. So there is definitely genetic predisposition for all of these diseases that I just mentioned and many more, cancers and whatnot. All of these things do have some genetic link. However, having a gene that puts you at a higher risk for a disease does not mean that you have to have that disease. If anything, it should mean that you work even harder to prevent that disease from fully developing, since you are at more risk for it. This tends to be an uncomfortable feeling though, right? Because it then, when a disease runs in your family and then you get it, for example, that I use diabetes, if everybody in your family has diabetes and then you get diabetes, it's kind of, the mentality of it is a little bit more comfortable that, oh, well, of course I got diabetes because everybody in my family has it. There's nothing I can do about that. And of course, it's not fun to have diabetes, but it takes it, it shifts the power and the control off of you. Whereas if you look at it and say, well, everybody in my family has diabetes, I should probably work pretty hard to take care of myself that I don't get diabetes. That's a bit more of an uncomfortable mindset to have. And it's a mindset that we don't often talk about here in our culture. We live in a culture of make whatever lifestyle choices and we'll get medicine to fix the problem. But that really is pretty backwards. For instance, if you were putting subpar gasoline in your car and then your car wasn't running well and you took it to the mechanic would tell you to stop putting that crappy gas in your car. They wouldn't prescribe you something to dump in the engine to try to counteract and to keep putting in the bad gasoline. And unfortunately, I think that's what we see here in America, where we have some providers do have discussions about diet, and if they do, it's often, oh, you should watch your diet. Here's a list of things that you should and shouldn't eat, but there's not a lot of emphasis on it. And that kind of makes sense because unfortunately in our curriculum here in medical school, there's not a lot of emphasis on diet there either. And I know the jury is kind of out on, oh, well, what diet should I be eating? Is it vegan? Is it carnivore? I mean, it's across the spectrum. But by and large, food that comes out of a box or a package, guys, that's not food anymore. That is a food-like product. If you switch from food-like products and boxed things, the things on the shelves in the grocery store, to more whole food, meaning the way that it came from the ground, the produce section, the eggs and dairy section to an extent, fresh meats. I'm not going to argue about if you should or should not eat or if the vegan diet is the best. Honestly, the jury is out on that. There's really good studies from a carnivore diet. There's really good studies from a vegan diet. I'm not entirely sure how to make sense of that, other than there is some interesting research coming out on epigenetics that suggests that different people who have historically come from different areas of the world may be predisposed to eating various levels of meat in their diets. But I digress. Really, I would love to see more of an emphasis on managing disease from the core. So the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the cholesterol, why did those things develop? Because they didn't develop because you weren't taking the pill. Okay. To be fair, that's not to say that medication doesn't have a place. It absolutely does. And that's not to say that they don't work. They absolutely do. But it is to say that it's not addressing the root cause. And anytime you take a medication, you're just adding more things in the body. And there's going to be some other effect from that, either short term, long term, if you feel the side effects, or maybe, it takes a couple of years. I read recently that now they're seeing a connection between statins, or the most common cholesterol lowering medication, and the development of Alzheimer's. And that's something we didn't know about before. So no medication comes without risk. There's also no risk associated with making better lifestyle choices. So that's why I think there should be more emphasis on that. Our food is making us sick, and the medicine is not making us healthy. It's not bringing us back into balance. I'm not surprised that it's the way that it is, because both of these things make a lot of people a lot of money. There's a lot of money in the processed food industry. They have big lobbyists. It's wild. The FDA really doesn't have near as much power as you would think that they do. I mean, just turn on the TV and you've got commercials for, whatever Pizza Hut is sticking in their crust this month. And then the next commercial is for a medication. These things go hand in hand. And then, of course, the healthcare system, let's be honest, is making tons and tons of money off of keeping us sick. And I think that's another issue here. The doctors get paid when you are sick. And I'm not saying, the doctors didn't set it up that way. I don't think, the majority of doctors are out here just trying to keep you sick. But that is how they keep their doors open. So there's financial incentives all around to keep us sick. It's really, the power is in your hands to take control of your genetic predisposition and make better lifestyle choices. I will just say it's over the 10 plus years that I have worked with patients, the biggest, and this isn't based on research, this is my personal observation, but the biggest factors to predict how well somebody does over time is their diet, things they consume, so smoking, alcohol, other drugs, and activity. When I see people with poor diet, lots of substances, and very little activity, those people do not do well. And I can hear some of you thinking it, because I've heard it before. Oh, but Kayla, I got to die anyways. Yes, you sure do. Everybody's going to die. No matter what you do, you're going to die. You can smoke up a chimney and eat McDonald's all day and you're going to die. You can, be a vegan yoga guru and you're going to die. No questions about that. I'm not talking about dying, though. I'm talking about your quality of life, because the people who I see with the poor diet, the substances, and the lack of physical activity are the ones that I see in the hospital all the time. They're in and they're out. They're constantly going to doctor's appointments. They're on a ton of medications, half of which they don't even know what's supposed to be doing, and a handful they got started on to manage side effects of this other medication. It's crazy. And despite all of the medications, they don't feel well. So you're not out and enjoying life. It's just wild that this is the default for how we practice medicine. So I encourage you. I haven't figured out how to address it systemically, but it starts with you. It starts with me. And having these conversations with the people around us who we care about, especially if we do have family who are living in this kind of cycle that I just described, bouncing between doctors and on all these medications and just still not feeling well. I would challenge you to discuss them. Hey, what are you eating? And a lot of people will put up a barrier about that, because again, it shifts from being a victim of their circumstances to now you're questioning if it's something that they're doing to themselves. And it's a really uncomfortable feeling. But on the other side of that uncomfortable feeling can be a life that is much more worth living and that they can get so much more out of. And really, that's what's important. And that's what we're all here for. So I encourage you to look at these things for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones. And you know what? You should challenge your doctor. If you have a doctor who has been giving you medication for some of these chronic conditions, or, and I didn't list other things too, like arthritis and bowel issues, all of that inflammation, it's all connected to these three big lifestyle choices I just mentioned: diet, substances, and activity. If you have a doctor who hasn't brought up diet, substances, and activity with you, or maybe they've mentioned it once, but it's not a big part of the conversation, you should challenge them about why it isn't. Why is it they spend so much time talking about the medicine, or they probably don't even spend that much time talking about it, but they certainly will give you the prescriptions and tell you need to take them. And maybe they tell you a little bit about your condition, but if they're not addressing the root cause, you should ask them why. And you should be looking for a doctor who is interested in addressing the root cause and helping you actually get and stay healthy. So Let me know if this is something you've thought about before, or maybe this is news to you. I'd love to hear some feedback. I do these episodes for you guys. And sometimes I'm just sitting here throwing darts at the wall, trying to figure out what you might want to hear about. So if you have any topic suggestions, questions for a podcast episode, please do not hesitate to reach out. Again, we're at herdforlife.com. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram as well. So thanks very much for being here with me today. Take care.